So in this video, I want to go over how you actually add value to a mobile home park. What happens to a park that makes it worth more money to somebody else? This can be kind of confusing if you're not from a commercial real estate or a mobile home park background. And the reason being is most of us understand the concept of value add in real estate as some sort of rehab, right? You have a house, you tear down the walls, you open concept or something along those lines. Obviously I'm not very experienced in that. No secret there. And then you shout, move that bus, and suddenly the house is worth more, right? Well, with commercial real estate, it's all about the numbers. The properties in commercial real estate are all income producing, meaning that they produce an income, and that income is what dictates their value. For simple math, if you go and double the income of a property, all else being equal, you're probably going to double the value of it. So that's how it works in commercial real estate. I want to go really quickly through this spreadsheet here and show how this actually works when it comes to a park in particular. So in this example, right, we've got our total amount of lots. So that means how many lots are there. And now of those 50 lots, 40 of them are occupied, meaning there's only 40 houses there renting lots from the park. Now, those renters are all paying about $300 a month. So that's our revenue there, right? $300 for each unit. So that means that we get around $12,000 a month. Now, what we always have to do when it comes to commercial real estate is account for vacancy. Now, obviously, there's a vacancy here in terms of there's 10 vacant lots, but that's not the vacancy I'm talking about. Vacancy also occurs on full lots. You think of an apartment building, people don't rent it every single day of the year. Typically, once they move out, it takes you a couple days if you're doing a really, really good job to get another renter in there. Sometimes it could be months. Now, we don't have a lot of turnover with mobile home parks. That's why I always use the vacancy of around 5%. But it's a really important factor in calculating the income because it does occur. And this could be things like missed lot rents, people get behind and they can't afford to catch up and that sort of thing, right? It does happen. So it's always important to be conservative and keep it in your numbers. So that gives us our revenue after our vacancy, right? So we're expecting to, on average, collect around $11,400 a month. Now, of that, we're expecting that we're going to spend around 32% on expenses in the park. This does not factor in something like a mortgage payment. Obviously, in this example, there is no mortgage payment calculated. So for the assumption here, we're just going to look at the value of what the property is without financing. And that's always the case. You can calculate your cash flow by figuring out what your net operating income is going to be minus your debt. But when you factor in the value of a property, you always take the assumption that there's no debt, right? Because if you obviously factored in the loan payment, well, everybody could have different loan payments, so it's not really concise. So in this example, we see that our expenses, if they're 32% of 11,000, they're going to be about 3,600 a month, and that leaves us net operating income of about 7,700 a month. And on an annual basis, it's $93,000. So this is the big number right here. This is the really important factor to understand. If we can increase this number, we can increase the value of the property. And the reason being is that people buy these properties based on a cap rate. So in this example here, we have 3 different cap rates just to kind of illustrate the point. And you'll notice here that a 7% cap rate is a higher value for the property than a 9%. And a good way to explain this a little bit more simply is that if you pay $1 million for a property and it has $100,000 a year of net operating income, you're getting 10% on your money. Now, if you pay $2 million for that property and it still only produces $100,000 a year, you're getting 5% on your money. So it can be kind of confusing that a lower percentage actually equals a higher value, but you just have to picture the end buyer, right? What are they paying for the property and what does that get them without factoring in financing? That's essentially what a cap rate is. It's not too complicated, but it can be a little confusing. And so when we keep going here, we'll see, okay, these are the different cap rates. And a pro forma is basically a future projection. And in this example, there's nothing that changes. It's the exact same variables all the way through here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tweak a few of these numbers and just show how that affects the value of the property when it's all said and done. So the first one and the most common when it comes to mobile home parks is a lot rent increase. Parks are notorious for having lot rents all over the board. And I think this comes into play because there's a lot of park owners who have owned properties for decades. And somewhere along the lines, they just get tired of raising the rents each year and they just stop. And they take this approach of, hey, I'm not going to do anything to fix the park. I'm too old. I'm not going to go there and trim the trees. I'm not going to make sure the roads are looking great or paint the mailboxes or whatever it might be. But I'm not going to charge you anymore. And so what ends up happening is you get these parks with really, really low lot rent. So it's very common to see sharp increases right after a purchase to get them to the market rate. So let's say in this example, when we're looking at this deal, currently they're charging about $300 a month, but we look at the market and we say, okay, well, they're charging $400 in this market. So we think over 3 years, we can steadily increase the rents and get everybody paying $400 and we won't have anybody move out. So let's see what that does to the value. Okay, boom. So it went up a lot, obviously, right? Our expense ratio doesn't change. Our expenses did go up, right? We have more renters, so we're probably going to have more wear and tear on those units, whatever that might be. And at the end of the day, our NOI went up dramatically, right? And it's pretty much a 25% rent increase here. And that's basically or actually this would be about a 33% rent increase. And what we see here is that, hey, that's about a 33% increase on the net operating income, right? Because all else continues to be the same. So when we look at our cap rate, if we were in a market where people were willing to pay a cap rate of 7%, we bought it for 1.3, which is face value, and now a realistic buyer is going to pay 1.7. So we've added $400,000 of value to this property just by doing that, right? In this example, we didn't do anything that's crazy CapEx. We didn't bring in any homes. We didn't have much tenant turnover. We literally just sent out rent increase letters each year, and this is what it ended up doing. So this is a reason mobile home parks are really, really popular with people, is because there's a lot of this low-hanging fruit out there of parks where they're extremely below market rents. So you're not even taking a guess as to what you can get for the rent. You know what you can get because there's other parks down the street getting that much. So all you have to do is charge the same and you'll be fine. So let's take another look at something else we can do here, right? So, and we're going to put it back to the same rent. And let's say 300 is the market rent. We don't think we can get any higher than that. Our park is just as nice as all the other ones around, and they're charging 300, and that's what we think the number is. Well, we're going to do more work to occupy it. So let's say in this case, those 10 vacant lots, now we don't have to spend any money to develop the lots. They're already there. And we don't have to spend any money bringing in the homes. And there's a million different ways you could do that with mobile home parks. But usually if you're going to do it quickly, like if we're going to try to fill these 10 lots quickly, we're going to come out of pocket. But in this example, let's just say we wait 5 years and we try to attract 2 to 3 new tenants a year. When we get it done, we're going to have 50 occupied lots. So our vacancy went up, right? That also increases our revenue. All the tenants are paying exactly what they were before. We still have that 5% vacancy in our calculations. Our expenses have gone up because we've got more tenants, more wear and tear on the units, and our net operating income went up as well. So now here we see, okay, perfect. We've added 330,000 if it's a 7 cap market, and we've added about $250,000 if it's a 9 cap market. So it's a really interesting fact here that you can really come out of pocket with zero money, just market the property better or offer incentives or whatever it might be, or reach out to your tenants every once in a while to see if they know anybody wanting to move in. And that extra hustle can add value to your property. So I'm a huge fan of that. I love doing that all the time. And that's one of the things I love about a mobile home park is you can it's kind of like buying an apartment complex where you can just add units for no extra cost. So it's a pretty cool way to go. So let's take everything back to where it was and look at another way that we can increase the net operating income, which is through a reduction in expenses. Now, I have to say this when it comes to the reduction in expenses is that it's really, there is a little bit of a nuance here. And what I would say is that we could mathematically say, okay, we're going to run this thing super lean and we're only going to spend 15%. So mathematically, you might think, okay, we just added, $250,000 of value to the property. But that doesn't really occur in the real world. And the reason being is that the whole industry underwrites to around a 30 to 35% expense ratio. So what that means is, let's say theoretically, we spend no money maintaining the property this year, and our profit and loss statement really shows a $0 amount for the expenses. Nobody else is going to buy that because we all know that, hey, your roads, maybe you didn't fix them this year, but you have to account for them being fixed every 20 years. That costs something. That costs something every year, whether you think it does or not. And so when it comes to expenses, it's really only going to add value if you're coming from something much higher than 30 and you're going down to 30%. Honestly, I don't see this occur much in mobile home park investing just because most park owners are pretty frugal, right? They don't waste money if they don't need to. And so they're typically they're typically not spending more than they need to. What you'll see all the time is them not charging enough, but you almost never see them paying too much. It does happen, but I personally just haven't come across it a lot. But let's walk through this example. So in this case, we're assuming that the park is spending way too much right now, right? And you can see how that affects their value, right? They're spending half of their money on their expenses, so their net operating income is a fraction of what it was before. So all we're going to do when we come in there, we're not going to fill up the lots. We're not going to charge more. We're just going to cut the expenses. So this might be a park where they're providing water and sewer and internet and, who knows what else, right? And pretty much what you're going to come in there and say, hey, I'm not going to do that, right? And when you don't, you reduce your expenses. This might be also in bigger parks, you might see an on-site manager. I'm of the opinion that you don't need an on-site manager at a park. There's a lot of park owners who will probably disagree with me on that, but I find that they run better when there isn't somebody on site. But nonetheless, this is an example of how you can reduce your expenses. And we look down here at the value we added. Again, $250,000 on the low end, as much as $350,000 on the high end. So now you can see where the value add opportunities really start stacking up. Right now, we said we found a deal where, hey, they've got some vacancy, their rents are below market, and they're just paying way too much. Let's say we did all the things here, right? We filled it up, we got more, we're charging more for rent, and our expenses went down. I mean, look at that value. It's insane. You're doubling the value of a property. And I would say this is not uncommon. Now, this part might be uncommon, right? Let's say we just go back to a normal expense ratio. You fill it up and you charge more, and what do you know? You're adding hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. Now, you might think, okay, well, if you're going to charge more, you're probably going to have more vacancy. You're not going to have less, right? You're not going to fill it up if you're charging more. And I would tell you that is completely false, right? The first park I ever bought, I think we had 6 or 7 vacant lots when we bought it. And the guy was charging pennies. It was like $150 a month, and the place was falling apart. The roads had massive potholes. Actually, one of them was so big, when the guy gave me the road quote, he asked me if I'd ever found any dinosaur bones. He was joking, obviously, but it was literally, you could just see layer upon layer of dirt and, decades and decades of dirt in these potholes. But anyway, I digress, as I normally do. But what it comes down to is this: people didn't want to move their home into that park because they could tell just from 5 seconds driving by that the owner doesn't care, right? You can't charge $150 a month and maintain a community. You just cannot. And when we came in there, we went up pretty quickly, right? We went from 150 to 265 the day we closed. And we went around to every single tenant and said, hey, look, we understand this is a big jump, but we still think this is extremely affordable. And we think this is justified because we need money in the park's budget to be able to improve and maintain it. And lo and behold, all of our tenants stayed. And we actually had new people move in because what? They see a new road. They see that the front entrance has been landscaped. They see new signage. They see that we're on tenants to make sure that they fix the skirting on their homes, fix their decks. And people people buying a mobile home, they're investing a lot of money to buy that mobile home. They don't want to put it somewhere where they think it's going to keep falling apart. And so we actually filled up, and today we're at 100% occupancy on that park. So it's totally possible, and this is all very realistic. But again, it's very simple. Now, when you go and you actually buy a deal, your underwriting model is going to be far more complicated than this, and you're going to factor in a million different things. And it's going to be a spreadsheet that has, 8 to 10 tabs. But ultimately, it's all going to come down to this. Is there any way you can add value? Can you charge more? Can you fill it up? Can you spend less? If you can't do those three things, you don't have a good deal. You just don't, right? So I hope this was helpful. I hope this kind of explains really how simple it is. And mobile home park investing is not complicated. The hardest part is finding these opportunities. But once it's been found, this part of the business plan is very, very simple. So hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for the next episode.